This is Bill Cunningham on demand.
All right, the man is here now, willing to set up whatever it is you want to be set up, Democrat, Republican, union, non-union, alike. Jack Crumley type or Jeff Henderson type makes no difference. Senator Bill Seitz is live in the studio. He's surfaced. He's here alive. He's not a leper. He doesn't have AIDS, herpes, gonorrhea, pyorrhea, or diarrhea. Bill Seitz, welcome to the Bill Cunningham Show.
Happy to be with you, Willie.
Have you been instructed by anyone not to talk with me, look at me, shake my hand? Have you been told to hate me and avoid me?
No, I have not. I have to be judicious in what I say and keep my comments to the bill itself, and I'm happy to do that. I always try to keep it to the issue.
749-7000 if you want to have a question. Now, give me the 2 or 3 reasons that a rock-ribbed conservative Reaganite who believes in the Tea Party from Green Township opposes Senate Bill 5.
The biggest reason is that it actually repeals collective bargaining while pretending to keep it. The fact of the matter is, when you get to impasse under this bill, management gets to decide what the contract terms are. In fact, by doing nothing, city council or the school board can adopt its own last offer to the union as the final offer with no power of judicial review and no independent third-party neutral determining how to resolve that impasse. The analogy I used on the floor last week is applicable. It's like in college basketball. The equivalent of impasse is the jump ball. And how do we resolve that in college basketball? We have an alternating possession arrow so that this time it goes to Butler, next time to UConn. But under this bill, the possession arrow is permanently tilted in one direction towards management. And therefore, it's just not fair. This is why the union folks are so upset. They realize that under this bill, they will never get a fair shake because people who are interested in the outcome of the matter are going to have the power to ride herd over them. They're losing their right to strike. They're losing their right to binding arbitration by independent third-party neutrals, and they are left wholly at the discretion of the elected city council or the elected school board, the elected trustee board, and in some cases, unelected boards. The unelected boards of trustees of our state colleges will get to make the final decision. The unelected boards of hospital trustees will get to make the decision. The unelected state controlling board will get to decide the terms of all state contracts. That is tantamount to an abolition of collective bargaining, and that's why you're going to see so many people upset this fall and trying to go out and get this bill repealed.
I have a tweet here from a lawyer who claims that what you're doing is giving to your proposal, which was not adopted, would be giving to judges a legislative function, and because of the separation of powers, that's invalid.
I don't think that's right at all. Under current law, there is power by the judiciary to review the decisions of the binding arbitrator. It's on a deferential standard, but it's part of current law. It was just repealed as part of this law. So now there is no judicial review of what these unelected boards of hospital and college trustees do, and we think that is going to render the whole thing subject to legal challenge. So I would argue the exact opposite of what this gentleman is trying to say in his tweet. The fact of the matter is we could set up a legislative system in which a panel of retired judges who were elected by the people would have the power to resolve issues of impasse. They don't have a dog in the fight. They're lawyers. They're fair-minded people, and they would be able to make the final decision using their powers of equity. There's no reason why we couldn't have done that, but instead we set up what I believe to be a fundamentally rigged system in which the very people that have been negotiating with the union for 3 to 6 months now get to unilaterally impose their view of the world over the members of the bargaining unit. That's not collective bargaining. That's collective begging, and that is an overreach, and we're risking an awful lot of great things in this bill by going that far.
So when Kasich and others say that we've kept collective bargaining, that is a facade. It is not reality, because when you repeal or keep collective bargaining, for some aspects of the bargain and for not other aspects of the bargain, but then you give to the legislative body the ability to impose their last, final, and best offer, there is no collective bargaining. It'd be as if on Sunday the umpires don't show up and the Reds take 3 of their reserves to go umpire the game against the Brew Crew.
Yes, that's right. That's the fundamental problem. We're letting the home team pick the referees, and that just is not the way it's done in sports. That's not the way it's done in a collective bargaining regime. If you wanted to be honest about it, we would have just come right out and said, we're eliminating collective bargaining.
Do it.
Because that is really what we're doing. But we're doing it through this labyrinthine frankly, deceptive mechanism, and I think people are going to see right through it. If you want to talk about getting rid of longevity pay, I agree. If you want to talk about having union members not give their money to Democrat causes without express written consent, I agree. If you want to talk about taking health care off the table so management can respond flexibly to the ever-changing world, I agree. All of those things, a lot of things that Eric the Bulldog Dieters mentioned on his show on Saturday. He's right. There's a lot of good things in this bill. But if the thing goes to referendum and the folks of Ohio throw it out because it goes too far, then we have nothing. I am interested in getting collective bargaining reforms that will stick, that will rebalance rights between management and labor in a fair and transparent way. I'm afraid we're going to have the baby thrown out with the bathwater this fall. I could be wrong. Maybe I will be wrong. But that's just my sincerely held belief, and it's not because I'm a fan of the unions or a fan of collective bargaining necessarily.
Some people claim that you're a fan of the unions, and nothing could be further. I mean, how much money do you receive from the unions when you run for re-election?
Zero. Historically, very, very little. I mean, I've received an occasional FOP endorsement just in the interest of full disclosure, but I've never been known. In fact, for 11 years, I've been saying that one of the things we need to do in Ohio is have collective bargaining reform because the law that passed in 1983 was never touched in 27 years. We needed to change it. But what we've effectively done is repeal it. And I just don't believe that Ohio is the kind of state that goes from 0 to 180 degrees different overnight.
See, a wise man told me once that Ohio is like a level. And if the bubble goes too far left or too far right, the voters bring it back. Collective bargaining is about 4 bubbles off center, but this Shannon Jones and Niehaus bill takes it like 10 bubbles to the right, and the voters are going to correct it, but the voters cannot correct this. They can't correct it the way you say. It's either all or none. And if it's none, like workers' comp 13 years ago, nobody's going to touch it for the next 10 years. So instead of us getting 50 to 70% of what we want, we're going to end up with 0.
That's my biggest fear, Bill. That's exactly my biggest fear. And I don't think that implies any lack of courage on my part. I think that implies some degree of understanding of the history of Ohio, which in my judgment is just what you said. We are a state that is maybe a bubble or two right of center, and that's all the further right of center we are. We're not Wyoming. We're not Idaho. Wish that we were, but we're not. And so therefore, I would favor a more incremental approach that would get us the savings we need without starting World War III between our public sector workers and their families.
But it's begun.
The war has begun.
I can't tell you how many firefighters at the GEBP and cops came up to me. And I'm looking at people that are 40, 45 years old with crew cuts, no tattoos, no earrings, and they're looking at me in the eye with crew cuts and saying, I'll never again vote for a damn Republican. And this is the heart and soul of the Republican Party.
Certainly, those folks are well respected in the community. Certainly, those folks have families, and certainly those folks feel put upon. For example, one of the provisions of this bill that I object to says that no one above the rank of sergeant can even be part of a police or fire union. Well, I don't really think police lieutenants have that much supervisory ability. Frankly, if you look at the history of Cincinnati City Council, they've done their best to muzzle the chief of police. So I think we're just being excessive when we try to say you cannot belong to a union. When we say a professor cannot belong to a union if he wants to be on any of the many faculty committees that exist at our universities to provide a shared vision and help curriculum development and all that. We're artificially restricting who may belong to a union. That's not about saving money. That's just an anti-union vendetta, and I think that's the kind of thing that's going to push those crew cut guys with fire and police to get off their duff.
They're mad.
And get angry.
It's World War III. I mean, it is. Can they get 230,000 registered voters? How hard is that?
Well, there are 360,000 state and local public workers that are affected by this bill. If they all have families times 2, that's 720,000. So that gives them a great margin for error if they can just get their own people to sign up. But I think it'll go beyond that. I think it'll go to their families. It'll go to their dads, maybe retired cops, maybe retired teachers, maybe retired university professors. All of them are going to be interested in sharing in this battle, and it will be expensive. But I do think they'll get the signatures to put it on referendum.
And then what does your political judgment tell you in November? Well, it's an off-year election when only motivated voters vote.
Well, I'm not Karnak, Bill, so I'm not going to venture a prediction, and we don't know what kind of money from out of state is going to be poured in on both sides.
Big money.
Certainly, this is
Big
a life
money.
or death matter
Life and death.
Life or death matter for the unions, perhaps to a lesser extent for the governor and his agenda. And I do support most of the governor's agenda. He's trying to turn around Ohio, and I have been a willing participant in helping him on many of his initiatives. But I don't want to risk his whole game plan by having this matter become the polarizing lightning rod that I think it will become.
It's life and death. It's World War III to the unions. They're going to get it on the ballot. They got 3 times the number of people in the unions and close family members than you need. So it's going to be on the ballot. It's going to be a specialized election. Only the motivated are going to vote. Those are the union types. So we're going to lose the damn thing. Instead of getting 50, 60, 70%, which the unions would freely give, we're now going to end up with 0, and it's going to be a great defeat, and I don't see why. What happened to seniority on this thing? Is seniority part of this?
Well, that's one of the things. That no longer does any public sector worker have any seniority rights. Now, I agree that having a rule that says last hired, first fired is not good. We should have changed that. But instead, we went the whole other direction and said that seniority cannot be the sole factor in making layoff decisions. Well, we didn't need to go that far because there are plenty of workers with more than 20 years of service to their city or their township or their school district, and now they are at risk of being laid off for no reason, simply because they're getting older, they're higher cost employees, and they're close to the time when they would earn their pension. And so I worry about those folks. I had proposed, why don't we protect those that have 20 or more years of service to enhance the chance that they would be able to earn their pension and be able to retire.
You're 46 years old.
Right.
You got 20 years in.
Right.
And here comes the layoffs, which are happening like at Princeton. They're happening in Lakota, happening all over the place. And the superintendent looks at the list. Seniority doesn't matter.
Right.
Here's teacher Bill Seitz, who's got 20 years in, and he's making $74,000 plus benefits and retirement coming.
Right.
And here's Susie Q out of college, who's making $28,000. Now, who's going to get laid off?
The risk is, under this new scenario, it's going to be the higher cost employee closer to retirement because it's in the vested interest of the school board to get rid of their higher cost employees and to try to deprive them of getting the full pension that they've worked so hard to earn.
So what does a 46-year-old do then?
Well, they're out into the workforce, and remember, they don't collect Social Security and they don't pay into Social Security. So unlike our private sector older workers, who when this happens to them, at least they have Social Security to fall back on, these folks are not going to have Social Security to fall back on. They're going to find themselves at age 46 severely unemployable, and that's ultimately going to become a burden on the state. So all we had to do was provide a little bit of protection, for those closest to retirement, so they don't just get thrown out like a used piece of fruit. But no, they were not willing to do any of that. They were not even willing to say, why don't we let it be a subject of bargaining what criteria we will use for layoffs. If we're not going to use seniority, well, let's sit down jointly, union and management. Let's figure out what fair criteria we could use. No, we have no interest in doing that. That's not part of the bill. I think just a little bit of softening in a couple of these areas would have been a good thing. Let's talk about, if we're going to get rid of longevity pay and we're going to replace it with merit pay, why not let that be a subject of collective bargaining?
Talk about
what are the criteria that define merit? Are we going to leave that to the whim of the school board or the school superintendent, or are we going to have a collaborative process in which the teachers and the school district can collaboratively determine how we're going to do this? It would have made for a more peaceful transition to the new world order, and it would have, in my judgment, made it less likely that we're going to have this very bitter, nasty, politically charged, rhetoric-infused campaign.
Well, can you imagine the heat? And I sense it when I walk around the tri-state and I talk to public employees. The heat. It's as if it's life and death. It's the future of my children. To them, it's where they live. This isn't some amorphous concept this is highly motivated. And I had a teacher in Loveland who's about 34 years old, tell me that their union has ordered them to get at least 10 people that are not registered to vote to sign up to vote against this. And they have pledged teachers all over Loveland and Milford to get 10 more of their friends and family and neighbors not registered to vote. This thing's going to be washed away by large margins. Can you see the commercials? It doesn't take Cora Rove to get cops and firefighters and their spouses on commercials that are going to make it look as if Senate Bill 5 is the worst thing since Ivan the Terrible took Munich. It's going to be an ugly thing, and the thing can't pass. And I had on a Tea Party member a couple hours ago who said this thing's going to pass easily. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I said, you don't live in the real world. You do live in the real world. You've been knocked around. You've been kicked around. You know what the real world is like. Can you see those commercials in November?
Well, I think they'll be able to make a number of very effective commercials, particularly around the issue of police and fire, because the Wisconsin bill that's been so controversial doesn't even touch police and fire. The governor of Wisconsin wanted to reform collective bargaining, but he made a conscious decision. I'm not going to make any of these changes apply to police, fire, or highway patrol. Here in Ohio, we did make the whole package applicable to police, fire, and the highway patrol. Now, my friends in the House made one change. They did allow police and fire to bargain over safety equipment. That's a good change. I suggested that change, but that change really doesn't amount to a hill of beans because, again, going back to the fatal flaw of the bill, when they bargain to impasse, management gets to impose its view of the world. So if the police and fire want a bulletproof vest and management says no for long enough, management can say, our deal stands. No bulletproof vest.
I'm going to take off my hat as city council member, and I got another hat I put on as arbitrator. So I'm going to take off this hat, put on this hat, and I'm going to decide whether my offer is good. Right. And the answer is going to be, of course. So there will be no collective bargaining in Ohio when this thing is. And by the way, it won't be implemented. If they get over the next 90 days to 230,000, which they're going to get, it won't be implemented until November, correct?
It won't be. If they get the right, that's right. It goes into a suspended state until after the vote is held in November. And then 30 days after the election results are certified is the earliest that the law could go into effect, assuming the voters sustain the law. And as you point out, there's at least a chance that the voters will reject this new law.
How much pressure are you under politically? If a book is written about profiles in courage in this session of the legislature, will Bill Seitz be one of the chapters?
Well, I don't know about that. I know that there wasn't a great deal of enthusiasm among those who voted for the bill to be for the bill. Those who voted against the bill, I think, did so with a clear conscience. Those who voted for the bill, I think many of them did so reluctantly. I think a lot of them, to their credit, want to support the governor in everything he proposes. They want to be seen as team players. I'm a team player, but on this one, I just had firm convictions that we were going too far and ultimately hurting the cause of collective bargaining reform and hurting the cause of the Republican Party.
The Republican Party will rue the day that this thing passed because it is a generational thing that these people will never forget what you guys did to them. They will never forget it.
Well, that's certainly the risk, and I would again urge our police and firefighters to remember that this was not monolithic. Six Republicans in the Senate joined 10 Democrats in voting no. The vote was very close, 17-16. I'm sure whatever the outcome in November, we will all abide that outcome, and we will move on. There's a lot to do in this state. We still have a large budget deficit to solve, but I'm not sure that this bill was going to do much to solve that budget deficit because, again, the law won't even go into effect at the earliest until the end of this year, does not affect any current collective bargaining agreements, and there's a chance that the whole law might get rejected. So we've still got that budget deficit to close, and the governor's come up with some intriguing ideas about how to do that. Big moves into privatization, which I support. Those kinds of things are innovative ideas that the previous governor would have never thought about doing. So we still have the prospect of video lottery terminals at our racetracks. We still need to get our casinos up and running. There are things we can and should be doing, and the governor's folks are busily working on all of those items, and I hope we get that resolved by June 30th. But this issue has become a major sideshow, at the least. And I worry that it jeopardizes popular support for the other tough decisions that we now need to make.
Lastly, do you still sleep with Senator Niehaus?
Well, I don't sleep with him, just to be perfectly accurate here. He and I share a 2-bedroom condominium, and yes, we still share those premises.
Do you have your food tasted that he prepares before you consume it?
Well, we dine separately, but Tom is a friend. He's got a tough job. He did a great job handling the debate on Wednesday night with a crowd full of angry folks, and he he handled them with respect and was able to get through it without breaking the gavel.
Without gunfire.
He did. Yeah, he did a very nice job of handling that emotionally charged evening. And it's just an issue where he and I have a sincere and honest disagreement. I hope he doesn't hold it against me, but I haven't been put back on my committee yet. But